Hello, once again. This is Political Dharma. It's June 24th, 2023, and I'm Alan Zundell. On this episode, I'm going to return to the topic of the Green Party and speak specifically about the widespread perception that it needs to somehow restructure itself, or it may be dysfunctional in some way. I agree with that assessment when I want to get more specific. So to start this off, let's take a look at a clip of Chris Hedges talking to Brianna Joy Gray on the Bad Faith video, YouTube video series, just a couple of days ago, what he had to say about the Green Party.
Now, the Green, I've had a long relationship with the Greens. It can be pretty dysfunctional as well. It's got to really open its doors to a whole new generation of activists. Whether they do that or not, I don't know, because some of these Green parties are just a collection of like old cranks who want to put their name on the ballot to be governor or something. No, I'm not. I've been there, but I do think they have to do some serious restructuring, and they have to step aside to bring in young activists, former Bernie activists, whatever.
Now, within that same interview on the Bad Faith YouTube video, Chris Hedges admitted that he didn't have a lot of direct personal experience within the Green Party to base his judgments on. This was more of a matter of his limited experience with his particular local party, I guess, and being there at speaking functions and talking to other people in the party, but no firsthand experience. So he does hedge a little bit, Mr. Hedges, and says that he just hopes that the Green Party does not have problems. But I think he's reflecting a widespread perception that something within the internal organization of the third party needs correction in order for it to become more effective at the work it's trying to do. My own perspective on this is limited as well, but I think it's a little more expansive than Mr. Hedges' viewpoint. I have been following the party for a number of years. I used to be a political scientist, and I was aware of them at their very beginning, although I didn't pay a lot of attention. I did vote for Ralph Nader in 1996, not in 2000, because I was afraid of the spoiler problem. Changed my mind about that over the years. But I got involved directly in the party first in 2004. And that was in the Berkeley, California area. Went to a few meetings, did some tabling with some other nice people, and those people told me a lot about what had happened at the national level in trying to select a presidential nominee after the whole Ralph Nader 2000 spoiler accusations, attacks, worries, all that had come down, and how it affected the party, and how this time around they had a lot of trouble choosing a nominee. They ended up with a pretty obscure Green from Texas, David Cobb. I don't know much about his abilities in general, but I do know he didn't do very well in that election. And so a lot of Green parties across the country lost their ballot line. Anyway, so I was somewhat involved in speaking to other members in California. When I moved to Oregon in 2006, I met some more people from the Green Party here and eventually became a member myself. I was a member from 2015 through to 2018, so it's about 3 years through 2018. 15, 16, 17, no, I left in early 2018. So that was 3 years in which I was involved. I went to meetings locally and got very involved in that. And then I joined the state coordinating committee, was an officer in that, the secretary of the state coordinating committee, often acting as a spokesperson. I also ran for office as the Green Party candidate in 2016. And I still keep in touch with people from the Oregon State Party. And I've been following things online to some extent, reading about how the Green Party is faring. And I did write a book on it when I was at the end of my tenure on the state coordinating committee. I had a lot of questions about the way the organization functioned. And I wondered, what was in the minds of the people who first started the party? What did they first see as possible problems? Why did they set things up the way they had? To get a sense of where this got to start and how it may have changed along the way and what the trajectory might be. So I did some research on that, realized that there was a good amount of research online, and eventually wrote a book on the creation of the Green Party. So this is also an opportunity for me to give a shameless plug for that little book, which runs through the really the National Green Organization that started before they founded the party and split up near the end of its existence into two different factions vying for the title of being the National Federal Elections Commission recognized National Green Party, able to nominate candidates for the presidency. So I followed up to about that point and took it a little bit into the establishment of the actual Green Party of the United States, which started out as an association of state Green parties, ran Ralph Nader a couple of times, and then got recognition by the federal government as a national organization for a party that existed in several states. So I wrote a book about that, got some sense of how it was set up and the problems they were experiencing then, many of which are still with them, including the one I'm going to be talking about. So that's my experience level. I've kept in touch with Greens. I've been involved in our state party and I've done some research on it, but I have not had direct firsthand experience in the national committee or in different states too much. I really didn't even see the inner workings of the California Green Party because, of course, it's geographically very widespread, and I just got involved in the local chapter there. So I have a limited view, but I think I have a good view. And I don't know that my opinions on this are definitive, but I set them out there and I would like to hear from other people that have direct knowledge of the party. Let me know if to what extent you agree, or you may see other problems within the party. So given that there's this perception of dysfunction, where does it come from? I think Chris Hedges is wrong that there's a reluctance of the cranky old men, or as his interviewer said, Brianna said, the old hippies from the 60s or something. I don't think it's reluctance on their part to give up power. I know I could be seen as a cranky old man. An old crank maybe is a better word, because I'm not that cranky most of the time. I may have crankish ideas depending on your perspective. I think my ideas make sense. Anyway, I don't think there's any reluctance to allow younger people into it. I think we would be delighted to see younger blood in the organization. I'd like to hear from them directly as to if they started to get involved in the party, why they dropped out, or what they found unappealing so that they would not want to stick around. I have my suspicions about that, but I don't think it's reluctance on the part of the old guard. I think in terms of holding on things, I don't think it's just the old guard. I think as people come in, they're enculturated into the culture of the party, which becomes embedded in certain practices, sometimes institutionalized as formal constitutions for the state party or the national party, or just rules that they've adopted, sometimes just in the way they practice things. And when the party first got founded in Europe, it took on what they call now the 4 pillars of the Green Party, which are nonviolence, ecological wisdom, social justice, and grassroots democracy. They were widely adopted by the various European Green parties, and they were understood in certain ways, though each term is has a little level of ambiguity, could be read different ways. So when the Green Party in the United States got started, that was a beginning point for them, those 4 pillars. They adopted at one of their first national meetings what is called the 10 key values of the Green Party of the United States. I defy anybody to remember all 10 off the top of their head. The first 4, though, were the same 4 pillars of the Green Party that I just mentioned. So they adopted these as well, and they also had an explanation of grassroots democracy. So let's focus on that grassroots democracy, because I think that is one of the key problems that is keeping them from becoming better organized internally. As it was understood at the time, well, I don't know if it was very clear at the time what exactly that meant. I think different people had slightly different ideas of how to institutionalize that. The basic idea is to give more power to the general membership, right? That's clear. Democracy is spreading out power to the people who are affected by it, and grassroots would mean very much moving it towards the bottom of the pyramid, that there maybe shouldn't even be a pyramid, that it should be as flat as possible, an organization, rather than having levels of power or authority within it. So that's the general idea. Now, if you look at how their slogans in the U.S. Green Party have changed over time, those four values in particular, and the symbols they've used to depict them, that democracy one has changed. Used to be, or I don't know that this is used to be, but sometimes you see it as a set of hands, four hands reaching out from different directions to touch each other, meaning all of us ordinary members are joining together to work together to make this a functioning organization and achieve our goals. That grassroots democracy label just changed to democracy at some point, simplified, but they're dropping the grassroots for some reason. And sometimes the logo is depicted as a ballot box with a hand dropping a ballot into it, which is not grassroots democracy. It's representative democracy, voting for some leadership of some kind in order that they can represent the rest of the membership. So rather than having the membership itself try to determine policy, set strategy, make changes, you would have some body of people representing the larger membership that had some level of power to determine things for the party. A little bit different. So there's some contention around that. I think some contesting of what democracy should mean within the organization. I came across an article online by a couple of academics, I think, Ruddig and Sojuria. This was originally copyrighted by them in 2018 and then published in 2020, where they looked at West European Green parties and particularly their view of that grassroots democracy idea. And what they found is that there's some differentiation in who supports the concept of grassroots democracy within the party. And what they found was that for strong support of grassroots democracy, it was people who were either on the left or coming or currently engaged in social movements of some kind. Now, why would that be? Why would people on the left be more inclined to the idea of grassroots democracy? Well, for socialists, people on the left, that is, I would take you all the way back to the new left of the 1960s. They were using methods such as consensus decision-making and flat organization, not having particular leaders, having rotation of people in positions as speaking for the group or representing it to the outside world. But a lot of decisions were made by groups of people talking until they could come to agreement, which could take a long time. And the reason for doing that is they had become suspicious of bureaucratic political parties, like a lot of the socialist parties in Europe, and also of parties that were strongly hierarchical, like the Bolsheviks within the social Democratic Socialists of Russia, who led the, Lenin's party, Lenin's faction within the Socialist Party in Russia that took over after the revolution. They didn't want that kind of top-down leadership, although there were some democratic elements in the Bolsheviks. They argued between themselves till they made policy, and then they just expected their people to follow it. So there was a reaction against that, knowing how the Soviet Union had gone, the emergence of Stalin and the suppression of dissent, the execution of people that didn't agree with the party line or the great leader, all that. So there's a reluctance to adopt anything smacking of the Soviet model or the bureaucracies of West European Democratic Socialist parties. And in the Green Party, there were a lot of anarchist socialists, followers of Murray Bookchin, a prolific writer on anarchist socialism, who had a lot of skepticism toward electoral politics, wanted to keep politics close to the local level and give it more widespread, spread out power more widely among the citizens, having things like, citizens assemblies and such, municipal councils of some kind. So there was an ideological disposition on the part of people on the left that got involved in the Green Party to look towards those type of internal decision-making processes. Now, those can be problematic for a lot of reasons. As the New Left found out quickly, there was an article called, I think, The Tyranny of Structurelessness. When you try to spread power out among the people, it ends up being not overt leadership in institutions that you can somehow control through elections or recalls or other institutions where you can recognize this person is supposedly a leader of our organization. Everybody's supposed to have the power, but it ends up there's covert leadership instead of institutionalized leadership. And the covert leadership goes to the people who have the best speaking abilities, the most experience in managing organizations, or the ability to persuade people, or just some kind of charisma that helps them to build a following. So there's not equality. There's the people who are more rhetorically skilled, the people who are more interpersonally gifted, maybe, or the people who are simply more power hungry to have influence and raise their profile within our organization, will amass some kind of influence over the rest. And so they'll merge in an unrecognized or uncontrolled way as leaders. That's what they found. Now, in the Green parties of West Europe, as soon as they start to actually win elections, they get more serious about their internal processes, and they tend to change and evolve over time. At least that's what I've been reading. I haven't been in Europe and talked to these people directly, but this is what I've read. So they find that they need some way of, making those internal processes a little more effective. What are the problems with grassroots democracy as it has been practiced? At least in my experience, not only the Green Party, but of other left-oriented things as well, including Democratic Socialist America to some extent. It's, if the people as a whole, the people of the organization, are supposed to be making decisions, how do they come together around one decision? A will? How do they form a will that encompasses the whole people? The only way to do that is by talking and discussing until you come to agreement. If you want to grow an organization, how are you going to get everybody into a discussion that's a part of the organization? It would be huge assemblies to great among people. And if you try to give everybody an opportunity to talk, it could go on and on and on for hours. Even smaller groups could do that. But if it was real large, imagine how that would be. And you have a lot of people talking who are not able to focus and be concise about what they're trying to say, get their point across clearly, not bore people, not drone on too long. So you end up wasting some time. You end up with impractical methods of decision making. Each time people gather, it might be different people, and they might unmake the decisions of the first group very briefly after they made them, within weeks or months. So you have instability of decision making. If you go by majority rule, a lot of them have gotten away from consensus, more towards, in some cases, you should seek consensus, but if you have to, you would take a vote, and it's, various thresholds of vote for different types of questions, like a majority or 3/4, 2/3, whatever it might be. There's a threshold that you have to reach in the vote. So there's movement away from general consensus, more towards majority vote. But still, if everybody's talking in a big meeting or even a smaller meeting, it can go on and waste time. And people get discouraged by that. Frankly, people get very tired of that. So, by the way, do you know what deliberation means? When people get together to deliberate, or they deliberate inside themselves, it means to make, not free, deliberate. What are you deliberating? Your will. Your will is free to go in any direction until you make a choice, make a decision, and act on that. You are deliberated at that point because you are taking action. No longer do you have the freedom of just doing anything because you've already done something. So that's what deliberation actually means. And that's where it should move you towards, the ability to act. And for a group, the ability to act together without constantly changing directions or people going in different directions at the same time is key to an effective organization. Everybody senses it. Nobody quite can always come to the same opinion about why that's happening, but people do see that's happening. And I think that's part of what people feel. If they don't see clearly, they feel it when they often enter the Green Party. Of course, the Green Party is subject to all the constraints of a third party in the United States. The system is rigged against them, so they tend to stay small, which makes it hard to keep members. They get discouraged, they get dispirited, or they leave because nothing's happening there, or they don't think there's any future in it. But there's the sense that, who's in charge here, and who's setting strategy? What is the strategy? I come in, I just want to be told something I can do. What are the things you need me to do, and help train me to do it? Maybe if I understood things more, I'd want to step up to a position of responsibility. But most people don't want to engage in a lot of long talks. Too many meetings, too many talks drives people away, except for the select few of us who like to talk a lot and think a lot and all that. We're a rare breed, not always the best decisions, but we do have lots of ideas. about it. So that's why some deliberation is important, but too much deliberation with too many people cannot be a good idea. It's also the question, who gets to participate? If you say it's going to be all the membership, all the people in the party, um, do they actually show up for meetings to decide things? No, they don't. You have any particular Green Party is going to have maybe thousands of registered voters who are at least nominally members of the party. But then when they make decisions about which candidates they're going to run for elections or changing policy within the organization, it's a very small set of people who show up at meetings. Are they representative of the larger membership? There's no way to tell, but unlikely. It's more likely they're people who have time on their hands, have the ability to get transportation to go to meetings, who have a certain level of comfort with talking in public and dealing with different points of view. So there's going to be a self-selected group of people who show up, I think, that are not necessarily representative of the whole. So is that really grassroots democracy, or is it a self-selected elite that's pretending to stand for the larger membership? It's an open question to me. Who shows up and how much participation do you actually have from the larger membership? Remember, if you're trying to create some kind of mass organization, or if you're trying to elect people to office, you need lots and lots of votes. So you need to appeal to a lot of people. So you can't be too exclusivist of a mindset of who has the right to participate in this, like tests of loyalty. Maybe to some extent, you want to avoid people coming in just to take over the party, which, by the way, happens because it's so easy in a small meeting making decisions for several people to show up and take over that. If you had larger meetings, it'd be harder to do, or if you had elected representatives guiding the organization, that'd be harder to do. But fear of entryism, as it's called, some outside group taking over it for their own purposes, there's some barriers constructed, but you don't want to go too far and keep people out who are interested in the organization, truly do care about supporting the values, but they're not that engaged. They don't want to get that involved at that level. So not sure if I made the point I wanted to make. Maybe I made it too much. So a lot of the questions revolve around leadership in general and setting strategy, making decisions, whether or not you're going to have designated leaders or not, or you're going to somehow try to make the general membership have control of it. Now, another thing I came across a few years ago was an article online on the Black Agenda Report by Bruce Dixon, published in 2018. The name of it was Why Our Green Parties Haven't Taken Off. And they do focus, among other things, in particular, on the question of leadership. And Mr. Dixon says that in good union organizing, what they will do is look for what they call organic leaders, people that seem to already have an ability or the trust of other people in their workplace, who look to them for cues on what to do or how to do it. They trust them, they trust their judgment, they feel like they know who they are and what their values are. So there's a sense of cultivating people like that who have they're exercising leadership skills. And it's just a matter of formalizing that and further training them so they can use that within union organizing and being a union officer, perhaps later down the line. So he is recommending what's a standard process. Look for the people that already seem to have some leadership ability and get them into positions of leadership. Green Party doesn't do that. He's focusing on that as well. There's this connection between the idea of grassroots democracy and the idea of not having overt leadership, trying to somehow not have hierarchies. What a hierarchy is, I think that's ambiguous as well. If you're a government, it's clear that if it's undemocratic, then you might have somebody exercising a lot of power over your life with the ability to force you to do things under threat of being locked up or executed at the worst. But when it's a voluntary association, like a political party in the United States, you don't have to worry as much about putting people in positions of power because they really don't have power per se. They can't lock you up. They can't force you to do anything. If you don't like the way they're running things, you can leave. They certainly can't execute you or get away with it, I would hope. Besides, we have the value of nonviolence, and that would preclude us from executing anybody. So they don't really have those kind of powers to worry about. I understand the argument of prefigurative organizations or institutions. That is, you're trying to model what you'd like to see in the larger society. But I'm not sure the larger society can do grassroots democracy in the more extended fashion that it's often envisioned. So what I'm getting at here is I think there has to be more of an acceptance of the concept of leadership. These coordinating committees should really become steering committees. I know this is going to rub people the wrong way, some people, and I think that may be part of the custom that they're clinging to. Not so much that an old guard is clinging to positions of power, but people who have certain orientations are still attached to the idea of trying to do grassroots democracy and avoid any formal forms of leadership. What I would like to see, and I'm just opening this for debate and discussion, you can change my mind about it, but what I'd like to see is the larger membership have a way to vote on who gets on any kind of state steering or coordinating committee, whatever you want to call it, and they become then the representatives of those people making the decisions for the organization. That way you can have some consistency. The people who are on the committee can get to know each other, dialogue with each other, and start setting policy for the future. Now, there's ways to rein them in. You can have methods to recall people from the committee. You can have regular elections once a year, perhaps. You can call special elections. You can have all kinds of provisions to keep them from running amok or getting too far out of touch. You can also make sure their meetings are open to the membership, whoever wants to show up. And now with online technology, we can have discussions online. We can have Zoom calls where the leadership opens up their meetings or has meetings where they explain their decisions to people who can then question them and challenge them. So there's ways of restraining leadership, but I do think you need to move into a model of representative elected leaders who then are clearly the spokespeople, are clearly so-called making the shots. But of course, what they have to do is get people on board. They have to persuade people. They don't have the ability to coerce people, or very limited ability to coerce people, maybe from some kind of social ostracization or something, but it's not very severe sanctions. They have to persuade people. They have to take the temperature of the group and know what it's willing to accept. They have to educate people if they think they're not understanding the reasons for going the direction they've chosen. So there's a lot of ways that you can set this up to make the leadership responsive to the community and guard them against taking things in a direction that the membership doesn't really want. So that's one of my recommendations, that you elect some kind of deliberative bodies and that they have regular meetings and et cetera. Another recommendation that I have, and this is a little different, it's a little off the track, but not too far, is the way that if you don't have something like that, and you have a more loose decision-making structure, what happens is they choose candidates for nominations let me scratch that and say, you revert to routine. You're a third party, it's difficult to win elections. You're having trouble taking a strategy because you have endless discussions about what to do and no path is clearly advantageous. So you can't just say, well, let's stick with this one and try it out, change later maybe. There's always a sense of, no, I'm not sure we want to go that way, and somebody else wants to go a different way. So you revert to routine. What you do is do the things you've always done in the same way you've always done them, even though it's getting you nowhere. Those things are primarily make sure we maintain our ballot access or get ballot access, work on that, run candidates for office, and maybe work for alternative voting methods like ranked choice voting, star voting, or proportional representation in the, not within the organization, but in the larger political sphere, to create better opportunities for third parties to strive, for alternative parties to strive. So I think you would be better off having the larger membership pick candidates and then pick fewer of them, focus on fewer races until you can build the resources to give much more support to particular candidates, the few candidates in races that you think are most strategically important. Either they have the best chance of making a good showing or even winning, could be nonpartisan elections at the local level, or you're running them at a higher level in order to just get enough percentage of the vote across the state to maintain your ballot line. Pick the one office you think is a good shot, or where you have something, some candidate to offer who would be a good fit for that office. Try to find better candidates, involve the general membership more in selecting them, because they're going to have a sense of whether or not this is someone they actually want to vote for if they got on the ballot. Take it away, take the decision for candidates away from just meetings of small groups. I've seen entryism in that. Sometimes you'll have multiple conventions. Here in Oregon, we've had that because we wanted to make sure we had as many candidates as possible to make us look like we were a functioning party. So we'd have a nominating convention early in the springtime, and then, oh gee, we don't have enough, so later in the year we get more, try to get more, and then it ends up being a smaller meeting with fewer people, and you can have a small set of people who support a particular candidate even if they don't really fit your organization well. Select them as the candidate of your party. So not so much focus on the same old routine. We have to maintain ballot line, we have to get people running for office. Slow down, think of it strategically, make decisions in a smaller group that can then be tested out before you decide to change tracks. So that's my general recommendations. That's what I have to say about what I think needs fixing in the Green Party. I'd love to hear comments from those of you who have thought about this, and come back and listen or watch next time. I'm on YouTube, Political Dharma, and I'm also on various podcast platforms. Like, share, come back now, y'all. Okay, bye.
With ease, I see the chains are breaking. We gained our focus, the moves we're making will prove to determine our self-worth as a passenger on this vehicle Earth.